apprentice. It has been some time, and you have grown strong in the Force indeed. Your weapon is fitting for a Lord of the Sith. You should be proud. And I sense you have proven yourself many times throughout your travels. Good. The time has come, apprentice. Kneel. Henceforth you are a Sith Lord. No longer do you walk the path of a lesser mortal. Now, and forever, you are a servant of the dark side. You are reborn, a ruler among lessers. Rise now, as Darth Apren, and may your old name be lost forever. Be proud, apprentice, but do not let this title go to your head. You are given nothing you have not earned, but you have much to learn before you can hope to truly claim the title of Dark Lord. You must not be complacent. You must not rest. You have risen to a new level of being, but as you progress, your challenges will only become more difficult. And so, I reward your advancement with a lesson. It is time we continued our explorations on the history of the Force. Take heed and continue your journey along the path of power. Accessing file, history of the Force. Processing. The Sith Wars left the galaxy devastated and the Republic in a state of fragility. The Jedi too had been decimated by the conflicts. Ossus was a barren world, and many of their finest had fallen before Exar Kun's Brotherhood of the Sith. The Outer Rim was left to fend for itself as the Republic licked its wounds. However, there was recovery. Slowly, the Republic rebuilt its strength, establishing several new trade routes and rebuilding their navy. The Jedi would move their headquarters to Coruscant and would also establish enclaves on several other worlds throughout the Mid-Rim. A new generation of Jedi Knights were trained, one which showed much promise and was a showcase of hope for the Order. This time would later become known as the Restoration Period. It was during the Restoration that the human male who would become known as Revan was born. His true name has been lost to time, but this human was a prodigy in the Force and extremely quick-witted. They were taken when young by the Jedi Order and were first apprenticed to the mysterious figure who would later become known as Kreia. But Revan would have many masters, learning all he could from one before moving on to another. He would meet and befriend the fellow human Alec during this time, and together the pair would grow to become two of the Order's most promising young knights. But this time was not all gilded. In order to ensure a speedy recovery, the Republic had to allow several corporations essentially free reign of trade along several major routes. This did allow for the Republic to rebuild its economy, but it also allowed these companies an inordinate amount of power. Power given is power that will be wielded, and eventually these corporations would attempt to use their influence to sway Republic policy. Little by little, they began to whittle away the institutions that protected the democratic principles the Galactic government had tried so hard to preserve since the Day Crusades. At the same time, on the fringes of the galaxy, the Mandalorian clans had begun to rebuild themselves under a new leader. A Tong, one of the few remaining progenitors of the Mandalorian culture, named Mandalore the Ultimate, took the title of Chief after his successor was killed over the moon of Duxon. He used his position to begin forging the Mandalorians back into a force to be reckoned with, and he established the Neo-Crusader movement, which would become so feared throughout the galaxy. They began to conquer a string of worlds along the edges of the Republic. Mandalore the Ultimate also opened their ranks to non-Tong for the first time, and the Mandalorians began to build an industrial society that revolved around their famous warrior ethos. Species of all kinds flocked to their banner, attracted by the warrior code, fleeing from the chaotic political vacuum which still existed on the edges of Republic space, or fed up with the rising corruption within the Republic itself. Their might grew, until their ships moved uncontested through Tion space, and were even raiding against the Hutts. Finally, in 3976 BBY, things came to a head. The Mandalorians stormed the world of Cathar and committed genocide against the Cathar people. The Republic hid the incident from the wider galaxy, afraid of being drawn into a war they were not ready for. But they did mobilize their fleet, setting up defensive positions around their industrial centers, around Terrace, and around the Mandalorian enclaves on Duxon. Tensions would continue to rise for a decade. In 3965 BBY, the Mandalorians would begin to probe Republic defenses along the Mandalorian Road. Skirmishes would become commonplace, until in 3963 BBY, the Mandalorians would finally launch an all-out assault. They would attack along 3 fronts at once, and quickly break through Republic lines to seize Taurus and rampage through the Mid-Rim. The Republic would barely contain these offenses with a string of lucky victories, and both sides would settle into a long, grinding slog of fighting that would begin to take a heavy toll on civilian population centers. The Jedi High Council, mindful of the damage the Order had taken during the Sith Wars, was hesitant to become involved. In fact, as casualties mounted, they ordered the Jedi withdrawn into isolation, focused on meditation and their roles as peacekeepers only. This decision did not sit well with many of the younger Jedi Knights, and especially poorly with the man who would be known as Revan. Revan and his friend Alec were considered to be the Order's best, and both of them argued that the Jedi's decision to remain inactive was prolonging needless bloodshed and suffering throughout the galaxy. The Republic media fell in love with the pair, but especially with the young, passionate Jedi Knight that would become known as Revan. They dubbed him the Republic's own Crusader, and soon dissatisfied Jedi were flocking to his banner. Eventually, the young Jedi Knight would garner enough support that he would decide to travel to the war front and see what was going on for himself. His followers went with him, and they would travel from world to world spreading their message. He would become horrified by the atrocities he saw on the front. He would send word back to the Jedi Council on what was happening. And still the Jedi, high within their tower on Coruscant, refused to take action. The Republic media would step up their support, labeling the young man the Revanchist and portraying him as a savior of the Republic, wrongfully ignored by the Jedi Council. His followers would also adopt the name, and eventually the Revanchists would find their way to Cathar, following rumors of atrocities. Members of the Jedi High Council had at this point come themselves to tell the young knight to return to Coruscant. If he refused, the Order would brand him a criminal and arrest him. While there, the group would discover the mask of a Mandalorian warrior. When the young knight touched the mask, the entire group was shown a vision of the Cathar's genocide. Cassius Fett ordered the entire populace of the planet shepherded into the sea, and only a single Mandalorian spoke out against the crime. She was ordered killed alongside the people she had tried to defend. It was her mask that had been found. The leader of the Revanchists could take no more. He donned the mask of the Mandalorian woman and took for himself the name of Revan. He swore he would not rest, would never stop until the Mandalorians had been defeated, and that the mask would not leave his face until the war was won. Although they still were against the idea of war, the Jedi High Council was forced to permit Revan and his followers to go. They could not turn a blind eye to what was happening any longer, and while they themselves would not go to war, the Revanchists would formally join with the Republic military as a deputized corps of troops known as the Mercy Corps. The Mercy Corps would find themselves on the front lines almost immediately, and Revan would lead them to a string of victories which would culminate in the Duros system. There, Revan and his forces prevented the Mandalorians from escaping with many tons worth of war materials. This battle would earn Revan the position of Supreme Commander of the Republic military, and a third of their fleet was placed under his direct command. With the Mandalorian offensives fully contained, and the Republic military under his sway, Revan launched an all-out counterattack. New vessels were rolled off the line by the Republic, including the now famous Hammerhead class, and these ships would help Revan's drive into Mandalorian-controlled space. He would retake Taurus, and Republic forces would drive down from the galactic north, driving the Mandalorians out of the core and the mid-rim. Althir, one of the first major industrial worlds taken by the Mandos, would be liberated 25 years after it was first occupied. Onderon and Duxon, Mandalorian strongholds for many years, would be assaulted and liberated in some of the bloodiest fighting of the war. Revan and Alec, now going by the name of Malak, began to take a more and more calculated response to the fighting. Their stance became win at all costs, and they had no qualms about sacrificing civilian population centers in order to gain advantage in the war. Revan knew that it was the Republic's industrial base that would ultimately win the war, and he made whatever decision was necessary to protect that base. By 3960 BBY, the Mandalorians had been driven back to their own space, or to a few strongholds in the Outer Rim. The war had left much of the Republic devastated, but both sides were nearing the breaking point. And so, Revan developed a plan. He ordered one of his best engineers, the Zabrak Baldur, to build a superweapon, a gravity generator that was dubbed the Mass Shadow Generator. He then divided his forces, giving half to one of his best lieutenants, a Jedi Knight named Demetrius Surik, and taking half himself to just outside the Malachor system. Mitra deployed her forces within the system as bait for the Mandalorians, and Mandalore took it, assaulting Malachor, hoping to catch half of the Republic fleet and destroy it in one fell swoop. A massive battle began, and at the height of it, Revan jumped the other half of his forces into the system, catching the Mandalorians between a hammer and an anvil. Mandalore the Ultimate recognized defeat was inevitable, and so he challenged Revan to single combat aboard the bridge of his ship. Revan agreed, and the two engaged in a titanic struggle. However, Revan was the victor. He struck down Mandalore, and the Tong, while he lay dying, made a confession. He had been betrayed. The entire Mandalorian war had been the machination of a far greater evil. Mandalore told Revan how long ago he had met a Sith, sent to him and said to be an emissary of a great Sith Emperor. This Sith Lord had showed Mandalore visions of the Mandalorians sweeping across the stars, of Mandalore ruling over a warrior people fueled by classes of craftsmen, scientists, and artists. Mandalore and his Neo-Crusaders had been the product of these visions. Their war with the Republic, a means to test the galactic government's resolve and to whittle down its defenses. The Tong gave Mandalore the coordinates to the Recod system, and then died. Revan took the Mask of Mandalore as a war trophy, and to prevent the Mandalorians from rising again. While Revan fought his battle against Mandalore and learned of a hidden Sith threat, Mitra Surik fought a desperate battle in space. Her forces drove the Mandalorians closer to Malachor, but their losses were substantial. Surik saw the battle was about to be lost, and so she ordered Baldur to activate the mass shadow generator. The Mandalorian forces were completely destroyed, caught in gravity's unforgiving vice grip. But the Republic was equally as devastated. Tens of thousands perished in an instant, and the Mandalorian wars were brought to a brutal close. The Republic was left reeling. Much of its fleet had been destroyed, and many worlds lay devastated. The scars of the Mandalorian wars would last for centuries. Whole species were wiped out, or worlds left unlivable. And to make matters worse, Revan and Malak disappeared shortly after the close of the war. Rather than stay to help reconstruction, the pair set out into the unknown regions to seek the hidden Sith Empire Mandalore had spoken of. The Jedi would be much weakened. Many of their kind were slain during combat, and of those who went to war and survived, almost none returned. The scars they carried from their time at war either finally pushed them into the arms of the dark side, or they swore off the Jedi and the Force, and faded away to try to live normal lives. The Mandalorians would scatter across the galaxy and fall into the life of petty mercenaries or pirates. They would find it difficult to find purpose with no Mandalore to lead them, though eventually one would come to claim the title. But that is a story for your next lesson, when we speak of Revan, Malak, and their journey. For now, what is there to be learned from the tale of the Mandalorian Wars? Were the Jedi wrong to go to war, given how badly they came out of it? This question has haunted the Jedi since first it was asked. The High Council prefers to look past their mistakes rather than face them. If they did, they would find themselves confronted by a larger truth, one which would shake the foundations of their code. Sometimes, suffering is inevitable. Sometimes there is no way to win. Never forget this lesson. The Mandalorian Wars, from the perspective of the Republic, were inevitable. They were driven by an enemy the Republic nor the Jedi had any idea existed, and as such, they had no hope to avoid the situation. So what was to be done? Should the Jedi have not acted? The Mandalorians were and are brutal and professional warriors. Their victory was almost assured without Jedi intervention, and they had shown themselves to be no kindness for the galaxy. While they did bring some measure of progress and stability to their space, they had no qualms about wiping out entire worlds who stood in their way. A Mandalorian victory would have left the galaxy devastated, perhaps even Coruscant itself a ruin. But as we have seen, Jedi intervention, while bringing victory, did not have a better result. Just as much pain and suffering was spread through Revan's campaigns as through Mandalore's. What does this tell us? We have to remember, the Force touches all. It moves throughout all of life, in every star, in every pebble. It has a will, and it moves according to its will. Oftentimes, it can be hard for beings as limited in perspective as we to see the larger picture. But with the clarity of hindsight, we can see that the suffering and pain of the Mandalorian Wars was destined to come, one way or another. The moment itself was a moment of great flux, a time where different threads in the Force came together to move the entire galaxy into a new period. There was no way around it, and yet, instead of seizing upon the moment, the Jedi hesitated. They stalled and stalled until finally the truth of the moment was literally forced upon them by the Force itself. They moved to action only when a vision slapped them in the face and forced them to move. If they had not hesitated, if they had only acted, met the Mandalorians as a whole order, with the skill of prodigies like Revan, steered by the experience of wiser masters, the war would have taken a completely different turn. The Mandalorians themselves credit the Jedi and not the Republic with their defeat. If the Order had faced them full force immediately, the war would have ended much sooner, and thus avoided much suffering. While death and suffering were inevitable, they could have been mitigated to cause the least amount of harm. Learn from the mistakes of those who came before us, my apprentice. It was a moment of flux, and when the Force is in flux, it often has negative consequences in the galaxy at large. The longer the moment goes on for, the more damage we see spill out across the stars. In moments of flux, when the course of the galaxy has been wrenched from your hands by the will of the Force, you must act without hesitation. You must find the path and walk it. The sooner you do this, the sooner the moment of flux will pass, and the least amount of damage will be done, both to your plans and to the galaxy at large. Do not ever hesitate. You are no Jedi, shackled by your fear and your thoughts restrained by your limited code. You are Sith. Your emotions fuel you. Your fear will drive you to action and prevent you from stagnation. Once more, you are my student, and you have an understanding of the Force few other Sith possess. If you have taken heed of my teachings at all, then you have learned how to view the Force as a whole, to begin to see the ripples, the echoes which it may send throughout the world around you. The Jedi knew the moment had come, but they lacked the full awareness needed to break their debate. You are capable of seeing the larger picture where others would not. You have the foresight of Revan, but you are unfettered by the structures which held him back. Remember this, and foster this talent within yourself. Hone the skill to conquer flux, and your environment will never be fully beyond your control. Meditate on this lesson, and how best to apply it to your journey along the path of power. For now, you are to travel to Malachor 5. There, in orbit around that dead world, I will unlock the next section of this lesson, and reveal to you the next step along your path. Go now, and may the Force break your chains.